The film begins in San Francisco in 1981. Chris Gardner, the protagonist, sells a medical device called the Portable Bone Density Scanner for a living. Each day he drops his son, Christopher, off at a low-cost daycare in Chinatown. Outside of the daycare, Chris asks the janitor when he plans to remove the profanity written on the wall.
When is somebody going to clean this off?
He points out that there's a misspelling in the word happiness on the daycare's motto.
It's an I in happiness. There's no Y in happiness, it's an I.
While waiting for a bus, Chris is approached by a homeless man who asks about the device he's holding, mistakenly believing it to be a time machine.
It's a time machine, isn't it? It seems like a time machine.
Afterwards, Chris visits various hospitals that might need the medical device he's selling. Because of this, he asks his wife Linda to pick up their son from daycare, even though she's working a double shift.
So I gotta get Christopher home, feed him, bathe him, get him in bed, and be back here by 7.
He needs to sell at least 2 devices per month to make ends meet. But most hospitals find the scanner expensive and unnecessary.
It's unnecessary and expensive.
So he hasn't made a sale in a while. Always in a hurry, Chris parks his car directly in front of hospitals. Unable to pay off his parking tickets, his car is eventually towed away. That evening, while having dinner, Chris notices a Rubik's Cube, which is still a new toy at that time.
It's a gift for Christopher.
From who?
Cynthia from work. It's for adults. Chris can't use it. She didn't know.
Linda asks if he has paid their taxes yet, and Chris says he needs to file another extension. This frustrates Linda before she heads back to work. After she leaves, Chris tries to solve the Rubik's Cube, but finds it quite challenging. The following day, while walking down the street, Chris notices a businessman in a red Ferrari, a genuine Ferrari this time. He asks the man what he does for a living, and the man replies that he's a stockbroker. Chris assumes that the job requires a high level of education, but the man explains that success as a stockbroker mostly depends on one's math and social skills.
Hey, I'm gonna let you hang on to my car for the weekend, but I need it back for Monday. Feed the meter.
After this brief exchange, Chris looks around and sees how happy everyone seems to be. He wonders why he can't be like that and constantly thinks about it. The next morning, Chris tells Linda that he plans to be home by 6 because he's applying for a job as a stockbroker. Linda finds the idea ridiculous, which Chris resents.
What job?
Stockbroker.
Stockbroker.
Yeah.
Not an astronaut?
They argue, and Linda reminds him that they have 2 months' worth of rent to pay. She insists that he should sell all of his remaining medical devices and leave that business behind.
This is what I'm trying to do for my family, for you and for Christopher.
Chris heads to a brokerage firm to apply, but leaves his medical device with a street performer because he doesn't want to go inside carrying it. He gives her $1, promising to give her more when he returns. He warns the girl that she can't sell it anyway if she decides to steal the device.
I can't even sell it, and it's my job.
Inside, he meets an HR representative from a satellite office. The representative explains that they receive a large number of applications. He only assists people in filling out the applications, and then he sends them to Jay Twistle in the main office, who handles this matter. While talking to the HR, Chris notices the street performer running away with his device, prompting Chris to quickly leave. He grabs the application form and dashes out in pursuit. But despite a long chase,
Hey! Don't move! Don't move!
the street performer escapes on a train. That night, Chris returns home with the application form but can't sleep, berating himself for losing the expensive medical device. The next morning, during breakfast, he watches the news about the Rubik's Cube, which reports that a math professor solved it in 30 minutes. As she leaves for work, Linda asks Chris to return without the device. Chris promises Linda that he will sell it so she won't have to see it anymore. On their way to daycare, father and son discuss the misspelling of the word happiness in the daycare's motto.
It's written as PPY, but it's supposed to be an I in happiness.
Is fuck spelled right?
Yeah, that's spelled right, but that's not part of the motto, so you're not supposed to learn that. That's an adult word.
Chris learns from his son that they watch TV series in the daycare instead of having lessons, which annoys him to the point where he reprimands a nanny, saying,
He says he's been watching TV.
Oh, little TV for history.
Love Boat?
For history, Navy.
That's not the Navy. I mean, he could watch television at home.
However, she tells him that he can go and pay more at another daycare. Moreover, she points out that he's often late with his payments, so he has no right to complain.
Can you at least put the dog upstairs in your room or something?
But
Afterward, Chris heads to Dean Witter Reynolds to submit his completed application form directly to Jay Twistle, the head of HR. Their conversation is brief because Jay is in a hurry. After leaving the office, Chris spots the street performer and her accomplice carrying the stolen medical device.
Hey!
Enraged, he chases after them. Trying to evade Chris, the performer jumps onto a bus. Chris narrates that he spent his life savings on these machines,
I spent our entire life savings on these things.
believing them to be revolutionary.
I even asked the landlord to take a picture
doctor.
But most hospitals and doctors saw them as unnecessary luxuries.
So if I lost one, it was like losing a month's groceries.
After a determined chase, he finally retrieves his device. Sitting at a bus stop, Christopher reminds his father of the promise to sell the devices.
You're not supposed to have any of those.
Yeah, I know.
You have 2 now.
Later that day, Linda notices both devices at home and becomes thoroughly disappointed. After giving their son a basketball for his birthday, Chris tries to explain to Linda what happened earlier, but she doesn't want to hear it. Chris promises that everything will be fine, but Linda no longer believes him. In the next scene, Chris catches Jay while he's hailing a taxi and reminds him about the application form he submitted a month ago. Jay tries to excuse himself, saying he has somewhere to be. Sensing an opportunity, Chris lies, claiming he's headed to the same destination, and offers to share a ride. Jay reluctantly agrees, and they both get into the taxi. Inside the cab, Chris talks about his skills and personality, but Jay is too focused on solving a Rubik's Cube to listen. Chris notices and offers to solve the cube to catch Jay's attention.
No, I'm pretty sure I can do it.
No, you can't.
Let me see it.
Skeptical, Jay hands it over. Chris explains the mechanics of the puzzle while working on it, and the taxi driver listens intently, holding his own cube in his hand. Jay jokes that he'd drive around all day just to see Chris solve it. Before Jay reaches his destination, Chris completes the puzzle, impressing both Jay and the driver.
Good job.
However, Jay leaves Chris behind, which means that Chris has to pay the fare. With only $5 in his wallet, Chris tells the driver to drop him off a couple of blocks away. When the car stops at a light, he tries to flee, but realizes he left his medical device behind. He runs back to grab it.
I'm sorry! I'm sorry!
Prompting the driver to chase after him, threatening to kill him. Chris manages to escape by diving into the subway and boarding a train. However, as the doors close on his hand, he loses the medical device. The same homeless man who mistook the device for a time machine sees it left behind. That evening, Chris calls Linda to apologize for not being able to pick up Christopher from daycare. Furious after missing her shift, Linda tells Chris that she and Christopher are leaving. Sure enough, when Chris gets home, he finds his wife and son gone. At that moment, he receives a call from Jay, who tells him to write down his secretary's number so they can talk the day after tomorrow. With all of Linda's belongings gone, Chris can't find a pen and has to memorize the number.
0256.
Yeah, extension 4796.
Yes, sir. 415-864-0256.
Okay, bye.
All right, yes. Thank you very much.
We'll see you soon.
He rushes to a nearby store to write it down, but a friend approaches, talking about a recent football game.
119, 120, double overtime.
Wayne. Can't talk to you about numbers right now.
What's your problem with numbers?
Chris struggles to remember the number while listening to his friend, talking about scores.
And you owe me money. You owe me $14.
I'm gonna get that to you.
I need my money.
14's a number.
The following day, Chris catches up with Linda, who has just dropped Christopher off at daycare.
Leave me alone. Never take my son away from me again.
After Linda says she's no longer happy, Chris allows her to leave, but insists that she can't take their son. That day, Chris returns to the daycare earlier than usual and picks up Christopher before Linda arrives. He takes his son home. That night, the landlord asks Chris for the rent, but Chris promises to pay later. The landlord suggests moving to a nearby motel, which is half the cost of the apartment. He demands that Chris leave by the next morning since painters are coming. Chris pleads with the landlord to let him stay longer and offers to paint the apartment himself.
I gotta have some more time. I got my son up in here.
The landlord agrees, giving Chris one more week as long as he paints the rooms. The next day, while painting the walls, Chris hears a knock on the door. He opens it to find 2 policemen who instruct him to accompany them to the station. Chris pays his parking ticket at the police station, but the officer tells him it will be verified at 9:30 a.m.
We verify at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Yeah, you gotta stay until this thing clears.
I can't spend the night here. I have to pick up my son. I have a job interview at Dean Witter at 10:15 tomorrow morning. I cannot stay
9:30
here.
tomorrow morning.
What am I supposed to do with my son?
Maybe we can go and have social services pick him up.
With no other option, Chris calls Linda to look after Christopher while he's gone. Linda agrees but says she'll return Christopher late. As a result, Chris spends the night at the station. The following day, Chris rushes to his interview at Dean Witter Reynolds. With no time to change, he arrives still wearing the same clothes from the day before. Embarrassed by his disheveled appearance,
Mr. Gardner.
he initially doesn't respond when the secretary calls his name. Eventually, he enters the interview room, and the panel visibly reacts with disappointment at his unkempt look. Chris bluntly explains that he was arrested the previous day for not paying parking tickets.
I've been sitting out there for the last half hour trying to come up with a story that would explain my being here dressed like this. And I wanted to come up with a story that would demonstrate qualities that I'm sure you all admire here, like earnestness, diligence, and I couldn't think of anything. So the truth is, I was arrested for failure to pay parking tickets.
Parking tickets?
And I ran all the way here from the Polk station.
During the interview, Mr. Frome, the head of the panel, appears unimpressed.
Jay.
Yes, sir.
How many times have you seen Chris?
I don't know. One too many, apparently.
Has he ever dressed like this?
No, jacket and tie. Oh, he's been waiting outside the front of the building with some 40-pound gizmo for over a month.
However, Chris's communication skills shine through, and he manages to make the panel laugh, easing the tension in the room.
What would you say if a guy walked in for an interview without a shirt on, and I hired him?
He must have had on some really nice pants.
Afterward, Jay congratulates Chris for impressing the panel despite his informal attire. However, Chris tells him that he'll think about the job because he learns that there's a 6-month intern period where he will not be paid at all. But Jay urges him to continue.
You know what I'll look like if you back out? You know what I'll look like to the partners?
Yes, an ass a-hole.
Yeah, an ass a-hole. All the way. Tonight, I swear, I will fill your spot, I promise.
On his way home, Chris reflects on the risks of the job. No salary for 6 months, and only one intern will be hired at the end of the program. If he fails, he can't even apply the 6-month training to another brokerage. All of this makes Chris hesitant. His only resource for the next 6 months is his 6 scanners, which he can still try to sell. After the interview, Chris heads home to finish painting the walls before Linda and Christopher arrive. Later, Linda returns with their son. That night, as Christopher sleeps, Linda tells Chris that she plans to move to New York to work as a waitress. Chris agrees, on the condition that Christopher stays with him. Believing that Chris can take care for their son, Linda tearfully leaves them for good. By the way, does anyone know what this lever is for? Write the correct answer in the comments. I wonder how many people know the correct answer. After she leaves, Chris calls Jay's secretary and leaves a message. He's in. The next day, Chris and his son move 2 blocks away to a nearby motel with the help of Chris's friend, who owes him $14. Since it's Saturday, Chris takes Christopher to play basketball before heading out to sell a bone density scanner. While shooting hoops, Christopher tells his father that he dreams of going pro. Chris, however, discourages him, saying that he was below average in basketball when he was young, and that Christopher will likely end up the same.
Not this. I don't want you out here shooting this ball around all day and night, all right?
He suggests that Christopher aim lower, but noticing the disappointment in his son's face, Chris encourages his son not to let other people tell him that he can't do something, not even him.
Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something, not even me. You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it, period.
They then head to a hospital to sell the scanner, and the hospital agrees to buy it, giving them some much-needed cash. When cashing the check, Chris lets his son buy a chocolate bar. The following day, Chris starts his internship, learning about the trade. The internship coordinator tells the group they need to do whatever it takes to attract clients.
But if you have to have lunch with them, have breakfast with them, if you even have to babysit for them, you will do whatever it takes to familiarize them with our packages.
He explains that in addition to passing the exam, they'll need to secure contracts to be hired. During his lunch break, Chris meets Mr. Frome on the street. Their conversation is cut short when Chris spots the scanner he lost during his escape from the taxi driver. He sees a homeless man carrying it and chases after him, only to be hit by a car. The driver politely asks if he's okay.
Hey, asshole! Are you alright, asshole?
But Chris realizes that one of his shoes has fallen off. He limps back to the program with just one shoe.
Hey man, you're missing a shoe. Oh, yeah, thanks. Thank you.
And must go around the city like this for the rest of the day.
Dad, you don't have a shoe.
Afterward, the film shows a series of scenes where Chris is constantly ordered around to buy things for his internship coordinator. He feels underrated and unappreciated. Every day after his internship, Chris rushes to catch the bus by 4 p.m. to pick up his son from daycare, and then takes the crosstown bus to make it home by 10 p.m. He continues to struggle with rent payments at the motel.
Hey, Chris!
Hey, Ralph.
I'm waiting!
All right, I got that for you, Ralph. I'm gonna get that for you.
At the brokerage, all the interns work their way through call sheets, contacting potential clients from the bottom up, aiming to eventually reach CEOs. Although interns are expected to stay until 7 p.m., Chris needs to pick up his son, so he only has 6 hours instead of 9 to do his job. To maximize his time, he's not hanging up the phone in between calls, saving 8 minutes each day. He also avoids drinking water to cut down on bathroom breaks. Despite these measures, after 2 months, he still can't progress through a full call sheet. Frustrated, he decides to break protocol and jumps up the list, calling to the CEO of the company directly. To his surprise, he manages to secure a meeting with Walter Ribbon.
Can you be here in 20 minutes?
20 minutes, absolutely.
Just had someone cancel. Come now. I can give you a few minutes before the 49ers. Monday Night Football, buddy.
As he's rushing out of the building, his internship boss asks him to move his car. Chris explains that he has a meeting with Ribbon, but the boss insists.
And you have to jimmy that.
Jimmy what?
You have to jimmy the key. And the other doors don't unlock.
Chris wastes precious time struggling with the jammed door and searching for a parking space. Unable to find one, he drives to Walter Ribbon's office in his boss's car, but gets caught in traffic, causing him to miss the meeting.
I'm Chris Gardner. I have an appointment with Walter Ribbon.
Oh, you just missed him.
On his way back, he finds a parking ticket under the windshield wiper. That night, at a diner, Chris fills up a check to pay that parking ticket.
Parking ticket.
We don't have a car anymore.
He tells his son to assist him at a business meeting this weekend. Christopher initially refuses, but his father convinces him to come by, saying that they might possibly go to a football game. In fact, he hopes that Mr. Ribbon will invite them to a game.
Possibly.
The following morning, as they head to Walter Ribbon's house, Christopher asks when they will be going to the football game.
I said possibly we're going to the game. Do you know what possibly means?
Like probably?
No, probably means there's a good chance that we're going. Possibly means we might not.
I know what it means.
What does it mean?
It means that we're not going to the game.
How did you get so smart?
You're smart.
He then knocks on Mr. Ribbon's door. Chris thanks him for the opportunity the previous day, despite missing it, and claims they were visiting a close friend in the neighborhood. He also lies about their plans to attend the football game, and his strategy works. Mr. Ribbon invites the father and son to join them in the box seats.
Hey, you guys want to come with us? We're going now. Come with us. Where are your seats?
We have upper deck.
We got a box. Come on. You want to sit in the box?
No.
Well, it's not actually a box. It's private section. It's more comfortable. You want to go?
Okay.
To appear like a successful manager, Chris hides the fact that he doesn't even own a car.
Hey, why don't you just put that in your car?
Sure.
We don't have a car.
Ah! Oh my God.
What happened?
I think I got stung by a bee.
During the game, Mr. Ribbon admits he likes Chris, but says there's no chance he'll accept his offer.
Come on, relax. Enjoy the game.
Nevertheless, Chris and his son enjoy the game from the box, and Chris gets to network with Mr. Ribbon and his business companions. After 4 months, Chris has sold all his scanners, giving him just enough money to make it through his internship. However, this progress is abruptly halted when the IRS seizes his bank account for unpaid taxes, leaving him broke.
Chris, don't jerk me around, okay, Chris?
I'm not jerking you around, Ralph, all right? I'm gonna get it.
Desperate for some cash, Chris asks his friend for the money he's owed, but his friend believes the debt was already settled when he drove Chris and Christopher to the motel.
You drove me 2 blocks, Wayne. That's 200 yards.
Frustrated, Chris argues with him until the friend slams the door in his face.
Get my money. All over me for $14. Get my money, Wayne.
Later that day, while watching his son play at a playground, Chris spots the medical device he lost on the subway. He catches the homeless man carrying it and finally retrieves the scanner. However, the homeless man starts shouting that he needs the time machine to go back in time to see Jimi Hendrix burn his guitar.
Bring back my time machine! Bring my time machine back!
Chris and Christopher rush to sell the device, only to discover it's broken, though the hospital promises to pay once it's fixed.
Chris, just come back when it's working.
No, I have to fix it now.
No.
Chris is distraught. That night, they return to the motel, only to find their belongings outside the room. Chris tries to open the door but discovers the lock has been changed. Exhausted, Christopher begins to cry, begging his father to let them in.
Open the door!
Did you hear what I said? Let's go.
Open the door!
Stop it.
Desperate for a place to stay, Chris seeks help from the friend who owes him money.
Wayne! Wayne!
But Wayne won't even open the door. With no other options, Chris and his son are forced to move again despite their exhaustion. They end up in a train station where Christopher points out that the device isn't really a time machine, as the homeless man had claimed. To lift his son's spirits, Chris pretends it is.
Yes, it is.
He presses the button and acts as if they're transported back to the time of dinosaurs, inviting Christopher to join the fantasy. Chris tells his son they need to hide in a cave from the dinosaurs.
A cave. We gotta find a cave. Come on.
They move to the bathroom, playing along with the game, and stay there for the night. While his son sleeps, Chris quietly cries, feeling the weight of this low point in his life. He covers Christopher's ears when people pound on the door. The next day, Chris heads to work with his suitcase. Jane notices and asks where he's headed, prompting Chris to make up a story about going to Sacramento to play golf with potential clients.
Awesome. Hey, let him win around.
In the next scene, Chris and Christopher try to find shelter at a homeless center, but are turned away because it's only for women and children.
Now, he can stay here, but you have to find someplace else to go.
We gotta stay together.
A staff member directs them to another shelter a few blocks away, and they rush to make it by the 5 p.m. cutoff. After waiting in line, they're almost denied a spot because the shelter is nearly full. Luckily, they secure a room after security finds that the person in front of them tried to cheat his way to the front of the line. Inside the homeless shelter, Chris tucks in his son and then tries to fix the broken scanner. He finds broken parts in it. The man reads his books under streetlights since the electricity is turned off at night. The daily routine of lining up at the homeless shelter becomes part of Chris and Christopher's life.
Hey, why don't you leave it?
We can't. We're gonna have a different room later.
So Chris brings his suitcase to work every day and tells everyone different stories about why he's carrying it. He learns how to finish his conversation with clients quickly, because he and his son have to get in line early to the homeless shelter. One day, Chris and his son attend a mass at the homeless shelter. After, Chris studies for the next day's internship exam. The following day, Chris finishes his exam quickly to join the shelter line in time. On his way out, Mr. Frome, just stepping out of a taxi, asks Chris to lend him some money since he forgot his wallet at the office. Despite his limited funds, Chris gives him $5. Unfortunately, he and Christopher are late to the shelter that night and must find another place to stay. To earn money, Chris donates blood and uses the payment to buy the part needed to fix his device.
What's that?
To repair the light.
Can I see it?
Yeah, sure. Just don't break it. Unless you want to sleep in the room with me for the rest of your life.
I don't mind.
Yeah, you will.
At the shelter the next day, Christopher asks Chris if Linda left because of him. Chris tells his son to never ever think something like that. He reassures Christopher that he has nothing to do with her leaving them. Christopher tells his father,
Oh, good papa.
After tucking his son in, Chris successfully repairs the medical scanner. The following day, he manages to sell the device, earning enough money to last them 4 more weeks. He excitedly tells Christopher that they'll be staying at a hotel that night.
A hotel?
But just for the night.
You can go back to the cave if you like.
No, thank you.
Ever?
I hope not.
They spend the night in a decent hotel, enjoying the comfort of a TV. The next morning, Chris and his son escape the harsh atmosphere of the city by going to the beach. Over time, Chris secures contracts with several of Mr. Ribbon's friends he met at the football game. In the next scene, Jay congratulates Chris on his final day in the internship program while they're in the bathroom. He commends Chris for securing many clients and tells him that, regardless of what happens next, he did a fantastic job. The message feels like a farewell speech, which makes Chris even more nervous. Later, Chris is called in by his internship coordinator, who leads him to Mr. Frome. Noticing Chris is wearing a new shirt, Mr. Frome comments on it. Chris tells him that it's because he's on his last day as an intern. Mr. Frome replies that he hopes Chris will wear it again tomorrow, because tomorrow will be his first day as a full-time employee.
Was it as easy as it looked?
No, sir. No, sir, it wasn't.
Chris can't hold back tears and thanks the panel. Mr. Frome returns the $5 he had borrowed from Chris. Afterward, Chris walks out of the building, narrating that this part of his life is called happiness. He heads directly to the daycare to pick up his son and embraces him tightly. The film then reveals that Chris established his investment firm, Gardner Rich, in 1987. The film concludes with Chris and his son walking together, joking and enjoying each other's company as the real Chris Gardner walks past them. An epilogue reveals that Chris eventually secured a multi-million-dollar deal in 2006. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to my channel. I have prepared for you a documentary about the career of Will Smith. You can watch it by clicking on this picture. Thank you for watching. See you soon.